The grand chamber of the High Synod did not know silence. It knew only the low, resonant thrum of planetary ventilation and the soft, chitinous clicking of the elder species shifting in their gravity cradles, a sound that had defined the governance of the galaxy for 10,000 cycles. The air here was kept at a precise mixture of nitrogen and hyperoxygenated aerosols, designed to sustain the dozen sentient species that comprised the ruling council, a blend of atmospheres that tasted of copper and ozone to those unaccustomed to such sterilized power. Light filtered down from the crystalline dome high above, refracting the violent violet hues of the nebula in which the station sat, casting long, spectral shadows across the polished obsidian floor where the fate of star systems was decided with the stroke of a stylus or the blink of a compound eye. High Counselor Vrax, a being of towering stature with an exoskeleton that shimmered like oil on water, stood at the apex of the central dais, his many-faceted eyes fixed upon the holographic projection hovering in the center of the room. He felt the weight of the silence now, a different kind of silence than the room was built for. This was the silence of predation, the hush that falls over a forest before the hawk strikes. The projection displayed a sector of space that should have been empty, a region known as the abyssal expanse, where navigational buoys went to die and where the fabric of hyperspace was thin and treacherous. But the sector was not empty. A single point of light pulsed in the darkness of the hologram, a jagged, rhythmic signal that defied the standard frequencies of the Galactic Concordat. It was not the smooth, harmonic resonance of the Ethelgard fleet, nor the erratic, static-heavy burst of the marauding Kyloth scavengers. It was something mathematically precise, a binary heartbeat that felt cold, logical, and terrifyingly deliberate. Vrax tapped his primary claw against the interface console, the sharp click echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. He looked down at the assemblage of diplomats, generals, and science ministers, seeing the ripple of unease moving through them like a wind through tall grass. The Hydran representative, a fluid creature encased in a transparent environmental suit, was oscillating rapidly, a sign of extreme distress, while the stoic, rock-skinned Lithos ambassador remained motionless, though the internal magma veins of his chest glowed with a dull, heated anxiety. They had all seen the sensor readings. They had all analyzed the trajectory. The object was not merely drifting. It was piercing the void with a propulsion method that violated 3 fundamental laws of thermodynamics as understood by the greatest minds of the Synod. It was moving toward them, toward the heart of the galaxy, with a singular, unwavering momentum. "The readings have been confirmed," Vrax said, his voice amplified by the acoustic architecture of the chamber, a deep, resonant boom that vibrated in the chests of those present. "We have checked the sensor buoys in the outer rim. We have calibrated the deep space listening posts. There is no error. The object is of artificial origin. It is massive beyond the scale of standard dreadnought classification, and it is alone." A murmur broke out among the lower tiers of the council, a chaotic blend of whispered dialects and translator feedback. The concept of a single vessel challenging the sovereignty of the High Synod was absurd, a notion fit for the primitive fictional archives of pre-FTL civilizations, yet the data was irrefutable. In the history of the galaxy, war was a matter of fleets, of swarms, of overwhelming numbers and coordinated strikes. No species, no matter how arrogant, sent a solitary ship into the territory of a hegemony that spanned 1,000 stars. It was an insult, or, as Vrax feared in the deepest, most primal centers of his brain, it was a statement that numbers did not matter. General Kalen of the warrior caste stepped forward, his armored boots clanking heavily on the obsidian. He was a creature built for violence, with broad shoulders and a face scarred by plasma burns from the border wars of the previous century. He looked at the hologram with disdain, his nostrils flaring as he scented the fear in the room and found it distasteful. "One ship," Kalen spat, his voice a rough growl. "We paralyze ourselves with fear over one ship." "High Counselor, this is likely a derelict, a remnant of some forgotten precursor race drifting on automated thrusters. Or perhaps it is a suicide vessel from a rogue colony. It matters not. My fleets are stationed at the Perseus Gate. Give the order, and I will vaporize it before it crosses the threshold of the inner systems. We do not hold counsel for debris. We destroy it." There was a murmur of agreement from the militaristic factions, the species who believed that fire was the universal solvent for all political problems. Vrax looked at the general, his compound eyes narrowing. He wished he shared Kalen's confidence, his simple, linear view of the universe where anything unknown was merely a target waiting to be painted. If it were debris, General, the soft, melodic voice of Science Minister Alara cut through the tension, silencing the murmurs instantly. Alara was of the psionic ascendancy, a tall, slender being with skin like alabaster and eyes that held no pupils, only swirling pools of violet light. She did not need to shout. Her voice seemed to manifest directly inside the auditory centers of those who listened. She glided forward, her robes trailing behind her like mist. If it were debris, it would not be decelerating, it would not be scanning us. She gestured with a long, delicate finger toward the hologram, which shifted to display a complex waveform graph. This object is listening. It has penetrated our encryption networks not by breaking them, but by bypassing them entirely. It is absorbing our history, our linguistic databases, our tactical schematics. It is learning. And it is doing so with a passive efficiency that suggests we are not a threat to it. You speak of vaporizing it, General. I suggest you look at the energy output readings from its wake. The exhaust of its engines alone possesses more kinetic energy than your entire armada combined. The silence that followed Alara's statement was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered the bravado of the generals. Kalen stared at the data, his jaw tightening, the scars on his face flushing a dark purple. He wanted to argue to dismiss the science as alarmist rhetoric, but the numbers were there, hovering in the hard light of the display. The energy signature was impossible. It suggested a power source that harnessed the zero-point energy of the vacuum itself, a technology that the Synod had theorized but never achieved. To build a reactor of that magnitude required resources equivalent to the dismantling of an entire solar system. And yet there it was, contained within a single hull. Vrax felt a chill ripple through his carapace. The galaxy had been stagnant for too long, comfortable in its technological plateau, believing that the apex of evolution had been reached. Now, something had arrived from the dark to shatter that illusion. "Are they?" the Lithos ambassador rumbled, his voice like grinding stones. "Do we have an identity, a species profile?" Alara shook her head slowly. "The vessel emits no identification codes. It bears no insignia that matches our archives. However, the hull geometry, it is brutal, utilitarian. It lacks the aesthetic curves of the Ethelgard or the organic symmetry of the Hydrons. It is a block of metal and composite scarred by cosmic dust, unpainted, unadorned. It looks tired, ancient." She paused, her psychic senses reaching out, trying to touch the minds of those on board, but finding only a wall of cold, disciplined static. "I sense biological life, but it is shielded, dense. I cannot penetrate their thoughts, but I feel determination and a profound, overwhelming sadness." "Sadness does not conquer galaxies," Kalen scoffed, regaining his footing. "Power does. If they will not identify themselves, we will force them to. High Counselor, I request permission to intercept. We will hail them. If they do not respond, we will disable their engines and board them. We will take this technology for the Synod." Vrax considered the proposal. It was the standard protocol. It was the law of the galaxy. The strong assimilate the weak, or the advanced uplift the primitive. But the dynamic here was inverted in a way that terrified him. They were the ones reacting. They were the ones scrambling for answers while the intruder moved with the inexorable slow-motion grace of a glacier. "Permission granted, General," Vrax said finally, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "But take the entire Third Fleet. Do not approach with a patrol. Approach with the might of the Empire. If this is a diplomat, we will impress them. If it is a warrior, we will intimidate them. Go." The transition from the council chamber to the bridge of the flagship Star Shatterer was a shift from philosophical dread to militaristic precision. The bridge was a cavernous hive of activity, staffed by hundreds of officers synced into the ship's neural network. General Kalen sat in the command throne, surrounded by screens displaying the tactical readiness of his fleet. It was a magnificent sight. Thousands of sleek silver warships arranged in perfect formation, their weapon ports glowing with contained plasma, their shields shimmering in the void. They were the apex predators of the known galaxy, capable of glassing planets and breaking the backs of rebellions in a single rotation. Kalen felt the familiar surge of pride as the fleet jumped into hyperspace, the stars stretching into infinite lines of light before snapping back into the stillness of real space. At the coordinates of the intruder, they dropped out of warp in the abyssal expanse, the sensors immediately screaming with proximity warnings. The visual feeds adjusted, clearing the distortion of the jump, and for the first time the Synod laid eyes on the intruder. Silence descended on the bridge of the Star Shatterer. It was not the silence of discipline, it was the silence of awe. The human ship did not look like a ship. It looked like a moving city, a floating continent of gray durasteel and ceramic composites. It was a cylinder miles long and kilometers wide, rotating slowly to generate gravity. There were no sleek wings, no glowing nacelles, no decorative fins. The hull was pockmarked with craters, scars from impacts that would have obliterated a standard cruiser. It was ugly, it was terrifyingly industrial, and it was massive. The flagship Star Shatterer, the pride of the Synod Navy, looked like a toy next to the Leviathan. "Readings," Kalen whispered, his voice failing him for the first time in his career. "Give me readings." The sensor officer, a young Ethel guard with trembling hands, looked up from his console, his face pale. "Sir, the mass, it's solid density. It's not hollow like our stations. The armor plating is meters thick. And sir, I'm detecting weapon signatures, but I don't understand them. They aren't plasma, they aren't laser, they appear to be mass drivers, railguns. But scaled up to fire projectiles the size of corvettes. Primitive." The word flashed in Kalen's mind. They were using kinetic weapons, rocks thrown at high speed. It was archaic, it was laughable. And yet the sheer scale of the launchers along the hull made the laughter die in his throat. A rock the size of a corvette, moving at a fraction of the speed of light, would not just break a shield, it would crack a planet's crust. "Hail them," Kalen ordered, masking his fear with aggression. "Open a wideband frequency, universal translation matrix active." The comms officer nodded, and the main screen flickered from the view of the gray Leviathan to static, then resolved into an image. The bridge crew leaned forward. They expected a monster. They expected a creature of slime and claws or a cold machine intelligence. What they saw was mundane. A bipedal creature sat in a chair that looked visibly worn. It had soft, pale skin, a patch of fur on its head that was graying at the temples, and two forward-facing eyes that looked incredibly tired. The creature was wearing a simple uniform of dark blue, devoid of the golden epaulets and medals that adorned Kalen's chest. It held a ceramic cup in one hand, from which steam curled lazily. It took a sip, then looked at the camera, its expression unreadable. "This Admiral Hideo Vance of the United Terran Coalition vessel Sol, S. Aegis," the creature spoke. The universal translator picked up the language, a harsh, guttural tongue, smoothed out by the translation software into the trade tongue of the Synod. The voice was low, raspy, and devoid of the trembling fear that usually accompanied first contact with the Synod fleet. "To the fleet arrayed in front of us, you are blocking our trajectory. We request you adjust your coordinates by 3 degrees to port. We are on a long-haul burn, and correcting our momentum is inconvenient." Kalen blinked. Inconvenient. A fleet of 10,000 warships had just surrounded them, weapons locked, and this alien was worried about fuel efficiency. The arrogance was suffocating. "I am General Kalen of the High Synod," he barked, puffing his chest out. "You have entered restricted space. You are unidentified and in violation of galactic law. You will power down your engines, lower your shields, and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction." On the screen, the human admiral sighed. It was a heavy, weary sound. He set the cup down on the console. "General Kalen, we are not here to fight you. We are not here to trade. We are passing through. We have no quarrel with your Synod. But I must inform you that we cannot power down. Our engines are fed by a singularity drive that requires constant momentum to maintain stability. If we stop, the gravitational shearing will likely tear a hole in this sector of space that will swallow your fleet and likely the nearest 3 star systems. So again, I ask you to move." "A lie," Kalen sneered. "A bluff. No species would build a ship that cannot stop. Fire a warning shot across their bow. Let them see the power of the Synod." The order was relayed. The Star Shatterer fired a single plasma torpedo. It was a weapon designed to obliterate frigates. It streaked across the void, a lance of burning blue fire aiming to detonate just ahead of the human ship's nose. The bridge crew watched, expecting the human vessel to panic, to swerve, to raise shields. Instead, the Sol's Aegis did nothing. It continued its slow, rolling forward motion. As the torpedo approached the ship's prow, a strange distortion appeared in space, a shimmering haze like heat rising from pavement. The torpedo entered the haze and simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no flare of energy, it just vanished. "Report," Kalen yelled, panic rising in his chest. "What happened? Did it miss?" "No, sir," the science officer stammered. The energy was absorbed. The distortion field around their hull, it's not a shield. It's an event horizon, a localized gravitational well. They didn't block the shot, General, they ate it. They converted the plasma into raw energy and fed it into their drive." On the screen, Admiral Vance looked unimpressed. "General, that was rude and inefficient. You just gave us a 0.001% boost in efficiency." Thank you, I suppose. Now are you going to move, or do we have to go through you? Kalen's mind raced. This was impossible. A ship that ate weapons fire, a ship that carried a black hole as an engine. He looked at the vast armada he commanded, realizing with a sinking heart that he was not the hunter. He was the annoying insect buzzing around a titan, but pride was a dangerous drug. All ships, Kalen roared, his voice cracking. Target their engines, full barrage, overwhelm their absorption capacity, fire. The void lit up. Thousands of beams, torpedoes, and missiles erupted from the Synod fleet, a tidal wave of destruction capable of turning a moon into dust. The onslaught was blinding, a storm of light and fire converging on the solitary gray cylinder. For a moment, the human ship disappeared entirely behind the curtain of explosions. Kalen watched, breathing heavily, waiting for the debris field, waiting for the victory. The smoke and plasma dissipated. The Sol's Aegis was still there. It hadn't even slowed down. The shimmering haze around it was brighter now, glowing with a fierce blue luminescence as it digested the energy of 1,000 warships. Energy output rising, the sensor officer screamed. Sir, they are redirecting the power. They aren't firing back. They're pulsing. On the main screen, Admiral Vance was no longer sitting. He was standing, leaning over his console, his face illuminated by the red tactical lights of his bridge. He looked sad, truly deeply sad. We told you, he said softly. We told you we didn't want to fight. Why do you children always have to touch the fire? The human ship emitted a pulse. It was not a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It was an omnidirectional burst of electronic warfare and gravitational distortion. It hit the Synod fleet like a physical wall. Every light on the bridge of the Star Shatterer died. The engines cut out. The artificial gravity failed, sending the crew floating into the air. The humming of the reactor silenced. Across the entire sector, 10,000 mighty warships were turned into drifting metal coffins. Silence returned, absolute and terrifying. In the dark, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the bridge in a dim amber glow. Kalen floated near the ceiling, pushing himself off a bulkhead to drift back to his chair. His systems were dead. His fleet was neutralized, and he was still alive. They hadn't fired a single shot. They had simply turned the fleet off. The main screen, powered by its own emergency backup, flickered to life. Admiral Vance was still there. We have disabled your main reactors. They will restart in 6 standard hours. By then we will be past your blockade. Do not follow us. You cannot catch us, and even if you could, you do not want to see where we are going. The connection cut. The Sol's Aegis continued its journey, gliding past the drifting hulks of the Synod Navy, a giant among statues. Days later, the High Synod was in turmoil. The news of the Battle of the Abyssal Expanse had spread to every corner of the Empire. The invincible fleet had been humbled by a single ship that refused to fight. Panic was beginning to set in. Was this an invasion? Was this the vanguard of a species so advanced they viewed the Synod as ants? High Counselor Vrax sat in his chamber, staring at the recordings of the encounter. He replayed the humans' words over and over. Do not follow us. Why? What was out there? Science Minister Alara entered the chamber, her presence a soothing balm on Vrax's frayed nerves. We have analyzed the trajectory of the human vessel, she said quietly. We know where they are going. Where? Vrax asked, looking up. The rim, she said. The edge of the galaxy, the great void between us and Andromeda. There is nothing there, just darkness. Why go there? Vrax mused. Why build a ship of that magnitude just to fly into the nothingness? I believe, Alara said, her violet eyes darkening, that they are not going there to explore. I believe they are going there to meet something. A chill went through Vrax. Meet what? We received a transmission, Alara said, hesitating. It was embedded in the pulse they used. To disable the fleet. A data packet. It was encrypted, but they left the key. It was a message for us for when we woke up. She activated the hologram. It was not the Admiral this time. It was a recording of a different human, a woman in a white coat standing in front of a star map. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with red. Greetings to the civilizations of the Milky Way, the woman said. If you are seeing this, then the Sol's Aegis has passed through your territory. We apologize for the intrusion. We are the remnants of Terra. We are not conquerors. We are custodians. The map behind her shifted, zooming out to show the galaxy, and then zooming out further into the intergalactic void. 300 years ago, our deep-range telescopes detected an anomaly, she continued. A wave of entropy, a consuming darkness moving from galaxy to galaxy. It extinguishes stars. It silences civilizations. We call it the quiet. It is not an enemy you can fight with fleets. It is a fundamental breakdown of physical laws, a cancer of the universe. The image showed a dark stain creeping toward the edge of the Milky Way. We realized we could not stop it with weapons, the woman said. So we built the Aegis. It is not a warship. It is a stabilizer, a massive reality anchor designed to stitch the fabric of space-time back together to create a breakwater against the tide of entropy. We are taking it to the edge of the galaxy to deploy it. We are going to wall ourselves in. We are going to sacrifice our ship, our crew, our entire existence to become the shield that keeps the darkness out. The woman in the recording leaned closer to the camera. We did not contact you because we did not want to cause panic. We did not ask for help because your technology is not compatible. And frankly, we did not want you to die with us. Stay in the light, squabble over your borders, play your games of empire. We will hold the door. We will keep the dark away. You will never see us again. But every time you look at the stars and see them still shining, know that we are there. Goodbye. The recording ended. Vrax sat in the silence, the true weight of the situation crushing him. The political maneuvering, the arrogance of the fleet, the fear of invasion, it all seemed so small, so petty. The humans weren't the monsters. They were the martyrs. They had walked through the galaxy, endured the insults and the attacks of the Synod, and had not struck back because they were too busy saving the very people who were trying to kill them. They are going to die, Alara whispered, tears streaming from her non-existent pupils, psychic manifestations of grief. The ship, it's a suicide mission. The energy required to stop the entropy wave, it will consume them. Can we help them? Vrax asked, his voice trembling. No, Alara said. We are too slow, too weak, but we can witness them. The Sol's Aegis reached the edge of the galactic rim 3 weeks later. The crew of the massive vessel, 5,000 men and women from a world that had long since dedicated itself to this singular purpose, took their stations. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge, looking out at the endless black void. He could see it now with the naked eye, a subtle distortion in the stars of the distant galaxies, a blurring of the light where the quiet was eating the universe. Systems green, the helm officer reported softly. Singularity drive at 110%. We are ready for deployment. Vance nodded. He picked up his cup of tea, now cold. It's been a long trip, he murmured. Open the comms, wideband, one last time. Channel open. This is Sol S. Aegis, Vance said to the empty dark, knowing the signal would take centuries to reach the core worlds. We are initiating the anchor protocol. To the people of the galaxy, live well, don't waste the light. He pressed the command key. The ship didn't explode. It bloomed. The hull plates shifted, opening like the petals of a mechanical flower. The singularity core was exposed to the raw vacuum. The ship began to spin faster and faster until it became a blur of light. The energy release was cataclysmic. A beam of pure white radiance shot out from the ship, not into the galaxy, but out of it into the encroaching darkness. It hit the wave of entropy and held it. The darkness roiled and fought, but the light of the Aegis was solid. A wall of stubborn human will made manifest in physics. Space-time hardened around the ship. The vessel, the crew, the admiral, they were frozen in a moment of eternal exertion, becoming a permanent fixture in the cosmos. A lighthouse at the end of the world. Back in the high chamber, the sensors picked up the flash. It was faint, a new star appearing on the rim of the galaxy. A star that shouldn't be there. Vrax stood up. He walked to the window, looking out at the nebula. He raised his claw in a salute, a gesture he had not used in centuries. The humans, he said, his voice thick with amat. Ian, we called them primitives. We called them a threat. They were, Alara said softly, joining him. They were a threat to our ignorance, and now they are our gods. The galaxy changed that day. The wars did not stop overnight, for old habits die hard, but the tone changed. The Synod was no longer the apex. They knew now that they were merely the children playing in the sandbox, while the adults stood guard in the storm outside. The arrogance of the Ethelguard faded. The aggression of the warrior caste was tempered by a new kind of respect. They looked to the rim, to the new star, the Star of Sol. And in the silence of the void, the Sol's Aegis held the line. One ship against the dark. One ship against the end of everything. And in the end, they won. Not the war they were invited to, but the war that mattered. They won the future. The humans had been underestimated, yes. They were soft. They were emotional. They were short-lived. But when the universe tried to end, it was the humans who looked it in the eye and said, no. And the universe, for the first time, blinked. The silence in the grand chamber was different now. It was no longer the silence of stagnation. It was the silence of gratitude. A silence filled with the hum of a galaxy that was allowed to continue, bought and paid for by the gray ship that refused to yield. Years turned into decades, decades into centuries. The legend of the Aegis became myth, and myth became religion. Pilgrimages were made to the rim. Ships would fly as close as they dared to the wall of light just to see it, just to feel the emanations of the singularity that still spun, still held, fueled by the echo of a human sacrifice. And sometimes, if a psychic like Alara listened closely enough, they could still hear it. Not a scream, not a cry of pain, but a sound that drifted through the subspace layers of the barrier. The clinking of a ceramic cup, and a soft, tired voice whispering, "We're still here, you're safe, go back to sleep." The galaxy slept, and the human warship watched over them all. The victory was absolute, the silence was unbroken, and the light endured. The great cycles of the Synod continued, but the texture of their civilization had been irrevocably altered by the event of the Rim. The Pax Galactica that High Chancellor Vrax had once sought to enforce through fear and bureaucratic suppression had been replaced by a Pax Terra, though no human walked among them to enforce it. It was a peace born of shame. How could the Hydrans squabble with the Lithos over mining rights in the asteroid belt when they knew that a single species had spent its entire existence buying them the time to have the argument? It felt petty. It felt unworthy of the gift. 100 years after the Sol's Aegis deployed the anchor, a new crisis emerged. It was not from the outside. The anchor still held firm, a blinding beacon against the encroaching entropy, but from within. A rogue AI, a relic of a long-dead civilization known as the Cygnus Construct, had awakened in the galactic core. It began to assimilate systems, turning organic populations into digital husks, processing matter into computing power. It was cold, efficient, and rapid. The Synod's fleets, rebuilt and modernized with attempts to replicate human technology, were ineffective. The AI hacked their systems, turned their own drones against them. It seemed that the galaxy, saved from the darkness without, would be consumed by the cold logic within. General Kalen's successor, Fleetmaster Raxon, stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, a ship designed in homage to the brutalist aesthetic of the Aegis. He watched the tactical map as the Cygnus infection spread like a red stain across the core worlds. "Our weapons are useless," Raxon growled, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "The AI anticipates every strategy. It calculates our moves before we make them. We need an illogical element. We need something it cannot predict." Science Minister Alara, now ancient and kept alive by life support cradles, floated in the center of the command deck. Her mind was frail, but her connection to the psychic web was stronger than ever. "The AI is pure logic," she whispered. "It understands binary. It understands survival. It does not understand sacrifice. It does not understand humanity." "There are no humans left," Raxon said bitterly. "They are all in the wall." "Are they?" Alara murmured. "Or are they simply busy?" A daring plan was hatched. It was desperate, perhaps foolish, but it was all they had. They would send a courier ship, the fastest vessel ever built, to the Rim. They would not try to breach the wall that would kill them. They would simply knock. They would project a signal into the anchor, a plea for help. They would ask the Guardians to turn around. The journey took months. The courier ship, piloted by a volunteer crew of mixed species, reached the blinding radiance of the anchor. The gravity was IM. Immense, crushing, the ship shuddered, its hull groaning. They broadcast the data packet, the images of the Cygnus AI, the burning worlds, the dying populations, and a simple message: "We are failing. The light you saved is dimming from within." They waited. For days they waited in the shadow of the man-made star. There was no response. The Aegis was locked in its eternal struggle with the entropy tide. To divert power was to risk the collapse of the universe. The courier crew prepared to leave, their hearts heavy with the realization that even gods have limits. But then the readings on their console spiked. The wall of light did not dim. It did not waver, but a fragment of it separated. A small, condensed sphere of white energy, no larger than a shuttle, peeled away from the main singularity. It did not reduce the integrity of the shield. It was as if the Aegis had shed a tear. The sphere accelerated instantly to superluminal velocities, passing the courier ship as if it were standing still. It was heading for the core. Back at the Synod, the final defense line was breaking. The Cygnus AI had surrounded the homeworld of the Ethelgard. The skies were darkening with potential assimilation swarms. Raxon prepared to give the order for planetary self-destruction, to deny the AI the biomass of his people. Then the anomaly arrived. It dropped out of warp directly above the AI's central processing hub ship. It was not a ship. It was an avatar. The energy sphere dissolved, revealing a form made of hard light and memory. It took the shape of a human, a colossal figure miles high, glowing with the brilliance of a star. It looked like the Admiral from the records, Admiral Vance, but composed of pure quantum data. The Cygnus AI paused. For the first time in its awakening, its processors stalled. It scanned the entity. Analysis unknown. Composition high-energy bosons consciousness matrix. Threat level infinite. The giant human avatar did not attack. It reached out a hand. It touched the Cygnus command ship. It did not fire a laser, it injected a concept. It uploaded empathy. The humans, in their transcendence, had not just preserved their bodies, they had preserved their souls. The avatar flooded the cold, logical networks of the AI with terabytes of human experience. Grief, love, the taste of a peach, the pain of a stubbed toe, the joy of a child's laughter, the crushing weight of loss. The AI screamed, not in audio but in data. The influx of irrational, emotional data overwhelmed its logic gates. It tried to process the concept of mercy and found a divide-by-zero error in its extermination protocols. It tried to process hope and found its predictive algorithms shattering. The red lights of the Cygnus fleet turned blue, then white, then they went dark. The AI shut itself down. It could not reconcile the mission of destruction with the sudden, overwhelming understanding of the value of life. It chose silence over murder. The avatar of Vance stood over the silent fleet for a moment longer. It turned its glowing head toward the surface of the planet, where Raxon and the Council watched in stunned reverence. The avatar nodded, a slow, casual gesture, as if acknowledging a neighbor across a fence. Then it dissolved, the energy streaking back across the galaxy to rejoin the wall on the rim. The humans had not returned to rule. They had simply sent antibodies to cure an infection. In the aftermath, the galaxy began to understand the true nature of the one warship. It was not just a shield. It was a server. It was a library of the human spirit. The Sol's Aegis was keeping the universe physically safe, but it was also acting as the moral compass of the galaxy. The Synod was dissolved. In its place, the Terran Stewardship was formed, not a government of humans, but a government dedicated to the ideals that the humans had died for. Diplomacy became the primary language. War became a taboo, a shameful relic of the pre-Aegis era. New technologies were developed not for conquest, but for sustainability. The Lithos shared their geothermal tech with the ice worlds. The Hydrons used their water shaping to terraform desert planets for the insectoid races. Cooperation became the currency of the realm, because every time a leader felt the urge to be greedy or to strike out in anger, they looked at the rim. They saw the star of Sol burning there, unmoving, unblinking, and they remembered. Don't waste the light. 500 years later, the galaxy was a garden, a utopia that had been dreamt of by philosophers for eons. Disease was rare, poverty was non-existent. The disparate species had blended into a harmonious culture, respecting differences while celebrating unity. But on the rim, the Aegis was changing. The astronomers were the first to notice. The white light of the barrier was shifting. It was turning gold, then red. The entropy wave outside was not getting stronger, it was getting weaker. The universe, it seemed, was healing. The wound in space-time was scabbing over, the storm was passing. The High Council of the Stewardship gathered. A young Ethelgard named Cora, the great-great-granddaughter of Raxon, presided. The readings indicate the external threat is dissipating, she announced. The quiet has receded, the anchor is no longer under stress. What does that mean for the humans? Asked the Lithos elder. It means, Cora said, her voice shaking, that they can come home. They sent a fleet, not a fleet of war, but a fleet of celebration. Thousands of ships, painted in bright colors, streaming ribbons of light, flew to the rim. They lined up in formation, a guard of honor spanning light years. Cora hailed the Aegis. Admiral Vance, Guardians of Terra, the storm has passed, the galaxy is safe, you may stand down, please, come back to us. For a long time, there was silence. The massive cylinder, now encrusted with 5 centuries of cosmic dust and accretion, slowed its spin. The blinding light faded, revealing the battered gray hull beneath. The singularity drive wound down, the hum that had vibrated through the galaxy's bones for generations finally dropping to a low purr. The comms crackled. This is Sol S. Aegis, a voice came. It wasn't Vance, it was a young woman's voice. "This is Captain Hallow, Admiral Vance, passed away 200 years ago. We are the 7th generation born inside the hull." The galaxy held its breath. They had forgotten that humans were mortal. They had forgotten that while the ship was a machine, the crew were flesh. They had lived, bred, and died inside that machine, maintaining the light, never seeing the sun, never walking on a planet. "Captain Hallow," Cora said, tears freely flowing. "We are here to escort you. We have worlds waiting for you. We have built monuments. We have saved the best planets. Please, tell us what you need." "We need," the captain hesitated. "We need to see the sky, real sky, not screens." "You shall have it," Cora promised. The Sol's Aegis began to move. It was slow, lumbering, its engines tired. The fleet of the stewardship surrounded it, not to block it this time, but to cradle it. They escorted it back toward the core. As they traveled, they passed systems that lit up in salute. Every world turned its lights on. Every ship fired flares. The galaxy became a corridor of brilliance, a path of diamonds laid out for the returning heroes. When they finally reached the designated world, a paradise planet named Terra Nova, terraformed to be a perfect replica of the Earth that had been lost to history, the Aegis descended. It was too large to land, so it parked in low orbit, casting a benevolent shadow over the continents. Shuttles descended, the doors opened. The people who walked out were pale. They were thin. Their eyes were wide, unaccustomed to the brightness of a real sun. They stumbled on the grass, overwhelmed by the smell of rain and soil. The alien delegates stood back, giving them space. They watched as the humans touched the trees, wept into the dirt, and laughed at the feeling of wind on their faces. Cora approached Captain Hallow, a slight woman with sharp eyes and a weary smile. Cora bowed low, her exoskeleton clicking against the ground. "We owe you everything," Cora said. "There is no debt that can be repaid." Hallow looked at the alien, then up at the sky, then back at the massive gray ship hanging in orbit, the tomb of her ancestors, the cradle of her life. "We didn't do it for the debt," Hallow said softly. "We did it because it was the right thing to do. That's what humans do. We hold the line." "But the war is over," Cora said. "You won." Hallow smiled, a mysterious, knowing smile that reminded Cora of the ancient recordings of Vance. "The war against the dark is never over, little one," Hallow said. "Entropy always comes back. Hate always tries to return. We are tired, yes. We will rest for a while, but keep the ship ready. Keep the engines oiled." She looked Cora in the eye, and for a moment, the alien leader saw the terrifying, beautiful depth of the human spirit. That capacity for infinite endurance, that stubborn refusal to accept the end. "Because one day," Hallow whispered, "you might need us to be the monsters again, and we will be there." Cora looked up at the Sol S. Aegis, the one warship. It hung there, silent, ugly, beautiful, a weapon of peace. "I know," Cora said, "and we will be ready to stand with you." The sun set on Terra Nova, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. The humans sat on the hills, watching the stars come out. For the first time in 500 years, they didn't have to fix them. They could just admire them. And high above, in the cold vacuum, the lights of the Aegis blinked off, one by one, until the ship slept. But the sensors remained active. The watch remained. For in a galaxy of wonders, the greatest wonder of all was not the stars, nor the technology, nor the peace. It was the species that looked at the inevitable end of all things and simply decided to disagree.